So we went to an event recently, which was a Wild Blood Country event, basically with like a toast to these two guys, the Way Brothers, because everyone is promoting the Wild Blood Country for Emmys, and so it was one of these Emmy events. And it was Kurt Russell, who was apparently toasting these two guys and Mark Duplass. So it's Chapman Way and McLean Way, and they're toasting it. We're like, Kurt Russell, I'm not sure why they know him or whatever. And little do we know, we get to the event, we see them at the next to each other taking pictures, and we're like, oh shit, one of the brothers looks exactly like Kurt Russell, and it's just it's his uncle. It's like it's their family too. Hey everyone, welcome to Dirk Island. My name's Michael Durkheimer.
I'm Alec Durkheimer, and this is the weekend show where we talk about weird and fascinating things going on in the world.
Usually through watching documentaries. So, Wild Blood Country.
No.
Not Wild Blood Country.
The Way Brothers.
Yeah.
Battered Bastards of Baseball on Netflix.
Yeah. So, this is the story of the Portland Mavericks independent baseball team that only existed for 4 years between, I think it's 1973 and 1977.
Mm-hmm.
And it's currently on Netflix, and we're watching it. We watched it because, I'd heard it was good, but obviously Wild Blood Country is like this phenomenon, and everyone's into that. And this is, through some accounts, their first work, their
of the
first
Way
feature.
Brothers,
yeah,
the directors.
Of the two directors. Essentially, the story is about this team that only existed for 4 years. Kurt Russell's dad, Bing Russell, also an actor, but not nearly as famous as Kurt, who loves baseball. It was his first love. Then decides, after a career, I want to go to Portland and start a baseball team.
And I love the showmanship of Bing Russell. The fact that he created this single A team that has open tryouts, which they describe as it's laughable that you would try to find good talent from an open tryout. And people are coming from all over the country because it's the chance to play pro ball for all these people who have been rejected. And he uses it. I love the showmanship of him, that he knows that people are laughing.
Yes.
He knows that people are reacting. Shows the open. People are like, yeah, right, this is going to work. This is so ridiculous. He's the only independent person out of an entire country of non-independent teams. And then they play the first game and it's a no-hitter. And all of a sudden it just catches. They win. No-hitter, and it's a total...
And they're like, oh shit, we got something here.
Catches fire, and then all the team starts developing unique personalities.
So much underdog story built right in, like a true showman. And like the documentarians for making it in the way. It was really an honor of the story that you could see was being constructed in live time too.
Well, I don't know anything about baseball, and they explained, which I liked, how there used to be hundreds of independent teams that weren't affiliated with like a White Sox development team or a Yankees development team. They were independent, which means if one of your players is good, they're not just going to be plucked to the major leagues necessarily right away, which was a problem for attendance. Is if you have a single A team and anyone, or a triple A team, and anyone's any good and starts becoming a star, they're going to get plucked right out. And why the Portland Mavericks were special is we went from an era of hundreds of these teams to zero to the Portland Mavs come on the scene.
They really, really presented well the bastards portion of that title.
There's a whimsical fun to it.
Yeah, like this whole
ragtag group of bastards who
just
want to play ball.
Yeah, but
then people start loving him for it. I really like this documentary, and I will say I don't have any interest in baseball. You were like, you wanted to put this documentary on, and I've heard it's good, and I still didn't really want to see it because I'm not interested in baseball. And I remembered a quote at the end of the movie they say about Bing Russell is the type of guy who, even if you didn't like baseball, he could make you love baseball. And I think this documentary does exactly that. And it helped that it's about Portland, our hometown.
Yeah, exactly. So we went to an event recently, which was a Wild Blood Country event. So we go to this thing, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, Kurt Russell is in the Battered Bastards. Like, they must have like been like, oh, it's about your dad. Like, we want to make a documentary. Like, why not we just go to, get you for the interview. He's like, yeah, I'd love to make something that puts my dad in good light. Little do we know, we get to the event, we see them at the, next to each other taking pictures, and we're like, oh shit, one of the brothers looks exactly like Kurt Russell, and it's just, it's his uncle. It's like, it's their family too. It's like, this is, I don't know, I think it's their grandfather who's Bing Russell, but you would never know, but it's such a funny thing because you start peeling back layers of the onion and you realize, oh, this is part of their story. They're not present in this documentary at all, but I believe it's either a tribute to basically their grandfather, Bing Russell, or we'd have to look this up. I don't know if we can find it out.
No, we can. We'll look it up.
But yeah, it's a family story. Kurt Russell is their uncle. He's one of the main interview subjects. And the event we went to is just him being proud of them for kind of making good documentaries. But it is funny because the way they present it is very much how you would expect Bing Russell to have presented it live. The story. It's such a canned underdog story, but the story that's very easy to love. The same with the team. That's how they sold it. They sell it with this open tryouts. The one thing I really loved about the open tryouts was the moment with the one guy who's like, my mom said I look like Charlie Manson in the Lost Years. Like, whatever that even means. It's just some guy with this crazy fucking beard and psycho
total
eyes.
hippie, overgrown facial hair. Wasn't he? He's like a teacher, right? Like an Oregon teacher.
Yeah. But just a crazy looking guy who's like. Anyway,
now
and then
he's team.
Like, no one in their right mind would even let me try out in this team. Like, puts me on the team.
Yeah, be on the starting roster.
Yeah, it's just hilarious. There were so many good moments, and the thing that's so incredible about that they were able to put this together is, for this type of documentary, a historical slice of time. Same with Wild Wild Country, you have to have the footage, and they've got Bing Russell, who is clearly taking footage. It's not only footage from public record. It's not only footage from whatever. Bing Russell loved baseball. The funny thing was he was making those baseball instructional videos in his spare time, being like an actor, kind of like a character actor. I don't know what they called him, like a plumber actor. Kurt Russell, his own son, said endearingly his dad was like a plumber. Like, he went to work and he worked many days of the week, and he was never the star who was at the John Wayne level, but he was in movies with John Wayne, and he was killed 137 times on screen. Like, he was the guy who was always losing in the duel But anyway, so this guy, then in his spare time, he's making baseball movies. There's clearly all this footage. There's footage of them when they lose a championship, and Bing Russell talking to the team, drinking, celebrating anyway, then giving a speech and clearly crying. They don't have the audio of it because it's in the 70s. I don't know really how, but some of them, they even did have audio. They had audio of him giving a speech to the team, when they were I think it was at tryouts or after tryouts when they got the team on. But anyway, just clearly someone with a movie mind who is live capturing the events as they're coming on, and then so perfect for, I think it's his grandsons, to then go make this out of it. It's like it was teed up in a way, but it was well told. It's only an hour and 20 minutes. It was pretty easy to watch.
Yeah,
for something that I also think, aside from being Portland and something I didn't know about, probably wouldn't have normally been so interested in.
Totally. And I mean, I don't say I love this doc with to over exaggerate how good it is. It's not mind blowing. It doesn't change everything you think about baseball or about underdogs, but it's just a great, quaint, well told story with a lot of characters in it and a lot of character to the way it's told. It's simple, but I liked it for what it was. It did a great job.
Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting. So I wanted to talk about the fact that the Way brothers discovering that Kurt Russell is their uncle.
Yeah.
Because one takeaway from that makes you think, okay, well, it's not, I just thought they made this great when you initially described that the Way brothers did Battered Bastards of Baseball, and then Wild Wild Country, which is a huge phenomenon. They're now like established talent. Yeah. I'm sure they can get a meeting. They can get their next documentary is getting funded.
Yeah, basically. they don't need Mark Duplass anymore to get them the meeting. Although they might like him and want to work with him, but like that was what I thought. I thought they impressed through their baseball documentary. They impressed Mark Duplass and Jay Duplass, and they were like, you guys can get meetings. You can make anything. You know how to navigate Hollywood. We're talents. We can make this Wild Wild Country. But that's what you assume from the outside. You think is the relationship, but it's in fact there's so much more to it. Probably.
You thought it was kind of the narrative of, they were talented, they made something that caught people's attention, and that was their way in. It was just the kind of pure, not to say it's not merit, but the pure merit-based kind of like, you submit that indie short, you make that short that gets attention, and then that gets you the credibility versus straight up having a connection to being related to Kurt Russell. But one takeaway is, okay, well, it's not a meritocracy. You need connections. That's what counts. But another way to look at it, which I think is interesting, is with all their resources and their skill is apparent now. They clearly are good at what they do. It's not like they're frauds in any way, but they still picked the most accessible, most open path they possibly could to their first documentary, which is an interesting thing to think, is like not necessarily stepping back and saying what, for kind of from the maker perspective, how do you take away how you would do this yourself? I thought that was interesting that they didn't just go, well, what's the most interesting thing we could possibly make a documentary
and then
about?
Use our connection to get us the meeting in Hollywood or whatever the hell. They actually pick something that was very much like their family story.
Yeah, something that was personal to them, something that I'm sure in a room they could describe that it's personal to them. They have the access and all the important factors, like it's lined up. There's not a bunch of gravitational forces that have to shift this story into place and their ability to make it, which I think is really interesting. It's smart.
Yeah, and the other thing is that it is interesting to think about that. I mentioned it before, but the similar character between Battered Bastards of Baseball and Wild Wild Country is this lawyer who doesn't really appear much in either, but in Battered Bastards of Baseball, that is Bing Russell's lawyer, who gets them essentially at the later in the film. It represents Bing Russell in this kind of antitrust, you got to pay me if you're going to screw me over type of situation. And there's basically he makes a closing argument in a court case that really expresses what Bing Russell did for baseball in Portland in those 4 years that the Portland Beavers, who were the AAA team, never did in the years before, and they existed afterwards, and it really put a cap on what he meant to do and what he did accomplish in that time. So that's why the lawyer exists in the baseball movie. And in Wild Wild Country, he's one of the guys who gets poisoned, at least allegedly, because he's kind of not just a lawyer, but doing town halls and stuff, and he basically gets on the wrong side of the Rajneesh, and so he's a random character in that thing. And it's funny just to see the same character, because you're wondering, just from trying to peel behind the layers of the similarities between the two, is that one of the reasons why they know about the Rajneesh to such a level? Is that why they were pouring through the content? I mean, obviously documentarians are pouring through all sorts of content, thinking of all sorts of things they could possibly go after, but having a connection, possibly just, both are in Oregon, but also a similar person who happened to come into conflict in both stories. I don't know the relationship that they still have with that lawyer, but clearly that is common thread that you're sitting there going, that might be something that actually you have a specific angle on, you have a specific knowledge about, because it's not the first time you've heard of it, you've heard of other things. And I mean, I've been to multiple events with them so far with the Wild Wild Country, and they were talking about there's a trillion things they discovered when they were finding out film, especially the Sheila element. The Sheila element in Wild Wild Country there are a ton of really fascinating things, especially, I mean, I've got the shirt on, and it's got the guy's eyes on the back. No, that's fucking what's his name? It's not Rajneesh, it's like the Bhagwan.
The Bhagwan, that's what they call him.
Yeah, so the Bhagwan,
The Rajneesh leader.
Yeah, Bhagwan. He's a character, but Sheila's the character of that show. I mean, at least there are probably multiple interpretations. There are plenty of great B characters. There are plenty of great B characters. There's plenty of great other things, but Sheila is the, you talk about anything unscripted, documentary or reality TV, anything unscripted. It's, in my opinion, character is by far the most important thing. And that's what they have in the baseball movie too. I mean, it's one of the things. They've got Bing Russell, who outstages even Kurt Russell in this role, and I mean, obviously he's the central figure, but also all the little bits of character that you get with each of the different players.
They're so good at developing it, and it's fun. It makes me think of, they mentioned at this event we just went to, the Way brothers, and they had one other guy who was there 7 days a week with them editing for 2 years there, but just in the editing bay, which is like a 2 year. They mentioned, I believe, a 2 year straight process.
I mean, 6.5 hours, and how much footage they would have gotten through to get to that. I mean, and so much interview. I know they spent so much time interview on that. Doing interviews for that.
And it makes you wonder. I mean, that's a meticulous process, and how much of the character is there and needs to be. How much the producer needs to make sure you acquire in found footage and get in interviews versus how much starts to emerge just after everything's in the can and you're just straight editing for 2 years. I wonder how much of a narrative is even there when they start out. When you consider a 2 year editing process. Yeah,
I mean, you've got to find your your story. You can probably always pick your story, but nothing. I mean, I guess this is just a little bit of my philosophy of unscripted overall. But yeah, as I was saying, character is everything. Every story can be great. And a story is usually the original thrust or the main thrust. And there can be other things. But every time, I mean, a central character who either drives drama and pulls out random things, like Sacha Baron Cohen is somewhere between scripted and unscripted, right? But he pulls out incredible unscripted by being a somewhat a fictional character in a real world. That's his genius, right? So, but you can have a character who pulls out brilliance in the unscripted world, because no matter where they are, or they can be the brilliance. But either way, and sometimes it's both. I mean, Sheila is both. This Bing Russell is probably a little bit of both. He has his own kind of magnetism, but he assembled the cast too, which each one had its own magnetism, and that's for this genre, for documentaries and for reality. It's always cast. It's always character. I mean, I say cast for reality, but it's always character that really drives it. I mean, story is so important, but you can have a single character who is just, I mean, it's at least my philosophy of the genre.
No, I think you need it. That's something.
Sometimes the character doesn't have to be human too. Some things are so fascinating that they really are able to reflect everything. There are a few documentaries that do that. Also, obviously,
for
nature,
this style,
sport,
I would say, yeah.
But there are things that are so fascinating themselves. But even in nature, you're usually thinking about character in a way,
and story.
That's where it breaks through. Character and story. I mean, yeah. Anyway. It's a whole philosophy thing, but thinking about, watching Blue Planet. I mean, the moments that in Blue Planet that really get to you are the octopus, or a certain type of fish doing something, seeing clownfish moving the shell. There's a certain fascination from a scientific perspective, but seeing a character in a way you haven't seen is, I don't know, it's the through line. It's the magic.
Totally. I think whatever style of documentary it is, the best filmmakers are putting the most narrative elements for what the story could possibly allow. So when it's a nature documentary, when it's Blue Planet, you could literally have just images with no narrative, no character or story elements, and they create scenes, they create drama, and they create character dynamics either between the same species or whatever. Each clip has a story to it, and they create narrative where it's not. And then similarly with this type of more, it's about a baseball team, they craft the character. They make sure Bing really stands out. And it's like, whatever documentary you're doing, I think you need to make sure the narrative elements are as well crafted as possible for what is given in the footage.
Yeah.
You know, even if it's a nature doc, which could technically have
that's the funny thing about it. You make a really good point, because you're talking about narrative, I'm talking about character, and they seem to be at different poles, but what you're really talking about is constructing the narrative, constructing the story in a way where you highlight the dynamics that really get you into the character. So I mean, that's obviously what the nature documentaries do, and that's what this baseball documentary did as well, where you're constructing the narrative in a way where you're really telling the Battered Bastards of Baseball story. You're telling this underdog story. You're telling a story about the Portland Mavericks, and the Portland Mavericks being named the Portland Mavericks. It's exactly on note. And so that's, you know, it's really they constructed the story. The story existed, the characters existed, but it's constructed in a way that highlights the characters. And it's not an extremely complex documentary. It's not the most deep or groundbreaking, but it is a very good 120 minutes, or not 120 minutes, hour and 20 minutes that it takes, and it's impressive.
Yeah, it's definitely for being their first documentary, or a substantial one that I'm aware of. It's really solid.